I think the important thing is it's not so much how I see safety and what my perceptions are. I think I would very much want to engage with young people, such as students who are, particularly those that are visiting Liverpool. It's very important that they feel safe. So, if anything, they get a good impression of Liverpool and Merseyside as a whole, and as well as those people that already live and work here. So, I would be wanting to ask you where you feel there are areas of the city where you don't feel safe, so that I could discuss with the Chief Constable, because the Police and Crime Commissioner is not about the operation of the police, the operational, that's up to the Chief Constable of Police. It's up to me to challenge and to support the police and give feedback. So, as you know, a Police and Crime Commissioner, for the first time ever, will be one person that you all would potentially recognise, hopefully for the right reasons, and that you could go to with your concerns. And yesterday I was fortunate to have been invited to be part of a panel, Your Voice, part of the European Youth Parliament. And the young people attending that were taken from schools across Liverpool. And I was somewhat surprised, and I'd probably say all the panellists were a little bit surprised at how young people perceive and see the police, because they don't feel safe. They feel they are perhaps sometimes being unfairly targeted, and that in fact, interestingly enough, because so many people are saying that they'd like to see more visible policing, and perhaps in an ideal world have a police officer on the corner of every street, the young people at this conference said that they did not want that, or that was the majority view, because they felt that was sending out a wrong message. What they did want was an assurance that when a time of need, a police officer was going to be speedily there. And I think that the something else which came out of it was where police officers are going into schools, and I don't know whether they come into the universities at all, which is something else I'd be interested in asking yourselves as students, whether during Freshers Week or something like that, the police actually come along and sort of talk to you, so that you know that the police are sort of on your side, as it were. And one instance was given to me where actually perhaps it would seem that perhaps more training should be given to police PCSOs on how they can engage with young people, because it's very much a community. We're all working together, and it's sort of, if you like, safety, I would say, is much more of a joint venture. You know, it's working together to be safe, and the police should not be seen as threatening. They should be seen as working with the community. It's very much a two-way thing. But when that relationship, it would seem, is potentially not working, then a Police and Crime Commissioner would be challenging the Chief Constable to say that the feedback that I'm getting from the residents of Merseyside is that you're not coming over very well. We need to look at your presentation skills, so that the community, when they do speak to you or ask for your support at a time of need, that it is done appropriately. So in terms of the police, in terms of operation, another young person said to me that in Liverpool on a Saturday night, and actually did ask if ever I came out in Liverpool on a Saturday night, and I do have my eyes open. And there was a comment that all the police seem to be in one area when there's something kicking off in something else. That might be done for a tactical reason, that all the officers are in one place so they can speedily respond to whatever, there might be a fight or whatever it is going on. So that is up to the police, is it? But when it's not working, then it would be up to if I'm elected on the after the election on the 15th, the count will be on the 16th of November. Then it would be up to me to say, is it working? Why isn't it working? What are the positive and what are the negative aspects of your operational side? But I think in terms of what I was saying before about being a two-way thing, I'm taking a very serious view to drug and alcohol abuse, and that is where I was asked about what I would be doing to challenge the police with regards to drunken brawls, say in Liverpool city centre on a Saturday night. I don't know that it would be fair for the police to be nannying people around, and they should be doing more important things. I think it comes down to responsible drinking. The responsibility of the clubs, pubs and bars in Liverpool, that when somebody has obviously had enough to drink, making sure that that is as far as it goes, and that somebody then, they're safely escorted off the premises and safely sent on their way home, because there's far too much of it happening, and sadly we see the consequences of that all too often. So I would say it's very much a two-way thing. It's the responsibility of us to be almost hold ourselves to account, so that the police can concentrate, I feel, on the more important issues of, for example, child abuse, murder, what the list could go on, rather than where it seems at the moment that many young people in Liverpool are sort of, particularly on Saturday night or most nights of the week in Liverpool city centre, through the hazards of over-drinking and over-enjoying oneself. So it would be, as I say, I would like to hear different views of where people are saying that they're not feeling safe, but it should be that the police are responding in an appropriate manner, so that if you have a problem, that you can dial the appropriate number, and your the response is appropriate to your need at that particular time.
It's clearly a really big issue, because for me, if you don't feel safe, that's a real problem. I mean, crime is actually going down in Liverpool and across the country at the moment, and that's for everybody, but people don't feel that. So it's from my way of thinking, if you feel that it's not safe, and because of that you don't go out or you don't do things, it's a bit like being under house arrest, isn't it? So it's not just about making things be safer, it's about making people feel safer. So several ways of doing that. Firstly, there are very clear measures which the police and the Commissioner and all the local authorities can take. So here in Liverpool, for example, we ran an alley gate scheme some years ago. So when the Lib Dems were in power, we put gates on alleys running behind people's houses, and that really reduced burglary in some of those areas that had high crime. So that's an example of things you can physically do, but there's also things you can psychologically do. And I think the psychological thing is about listening to what people actually think about crime. Now, I had a leaflet through my door recently from Merseyside Police. It was their annual survey. So they were asking everybody, all the students, all the residents, everyone in Merseyside, what they wanted to see done about policing. Less than 2% of the population returned that. So the police don't really know what's important to people. And I think the Crime Commissioner has to say, right, it's my job to go out and find out what's important to you. So what I'll be doing is, I'll be doing a weekly surgery in a different part of the area, many of them in Liverpool, some of them in student premises, to find out what people think. And I'll also be going to where people are. It's no good me sitting in an office saying, come and tell me if you've got a problem, because most people don't, do they? They maybe moan to each other, or they maybe get worried, but they don't actually come and see you. So my job is to go out where people are and find out what they think. And if that means dropping into a student union, dropping into a meeting, then I will do that, because the Police Commissioner's job is to be the voice of the people of Liverpool and Merseyside in terms of crime and policing. Now, a lot of people say they feel safer when they see police on the streets. You will never, ever, ever see a policeman on every street corner. It's statistically impossible. But there's a lot that can be done to make the police more visible. And certainly I'll be looking at the budget to see how we can move money into more frontline policing and visibility approaches, and less on things like, well, headquarters buildings, for example. There must be savings that can be made on buildings. And for students, I'm sure they would rather, if they had to report something to the police, that a policeman was near and visible and familiar, not necessarily in a police station, but say, in the student union bar on a regular occasion or in the local supermarket, just being seen. So that's about moving money from behind the scenes staff to frontline staff. I'm very concerned about hate crime, and hate crime is when someone is a victim because of who they are. So maybe it's because of their race, or maybe it's because of their sexuality, or their gender, or their religion. It's a relatively small amount of the crime that goes on, but it's growing and it's worrying. So one of the priorities for me would be saying, how do we identify it? How do we tackle it? But more importantly, actually, how do we prevent it? Because people don't get born hating other people, do they? Somewhere along the line, this attitude develops, and somewhere like John Moores and the other universities in the area are fantastic because they're diverse places with people of all sorts of backgrounds. But because of that, if you have people round about who are likely to commit hate crime, then students are more vulnerable. So we need to tackle this at root. We need to be saying, why is it that people are allowed or encouraged to develop these attitudes? So some quick fixes, which are to do with physical security, some budget fixes, which are to do with how we spend the money, some are about getting out and talking to people and finding out what they think and being an accessible person, and some are about longer term approaches which are about getting to the root of the problem. Police and Crime Commission, it's a funny job, it's a new job, and I think it will be what people make of it. So for me, my focus would very much be on getting out into the public, talking to people, finding out what they want, and then bringing people together to solve problems. I hate sitting in offices, frankly, but I love meeting people, so my focus would be on coming to see you guys at John Moores, the wider student population, the wider population of Liverpool and Merseyside, and saying, tell me what you really think, because only if we work together can we solve the problems.
I have, I think, 4 key messages that I would send to students and also to other residents, because we need to have that dialogue between the student community and the permanent community as well. Firstly, I would make sure that students' voices are heard and that their point of view gets represented. As I've said in my press to students and when I've talked to student reporters, if you look at the complaints the police get and the perspective the police get in student areas such as Wavertree or Kensington or Edge Hill or Mossley Hill, then they tend to get lots of complaints about students, but actually that isn't representative of the whole population. So I would want to have a student perspective put across, which would also show the positive contribution that the vast majority of students make to Liverpool and to the wider community. And even yesterday, I was talking to a taxi driver who, as always, was saying how good it was when the students were back. We were chatting about policing, but he also mentioned that comment. Secondly, I would work with the student representative bodies, with Liverpool Students' Union, with the Guild of Students at Liverpool University, with the Student Union at Hope, to promote the public safety campaigns that they're doing. They already work in partnership with the community safety bodies and with the police. I know the universities work closely with the police. I would help that liaison, help publicise those campaigns. And I think that has 2 benefits. One of those is that it's working on student community safety, but we do have to look at the negative side as well. Some students do cause a nuisance, and I think the universities don't take that seriously enough. I know that as a university lecturer, because people complain to me about students, and I can sometimes informally help deal with those problems, but there's no way that the universities formally actually do anything about it. It doesn't help their reputation. The student unions, I think, are much more proactive. I think they work much more positively, and I know the police are running a campaign on student safety at the moment, but it's still, to my mind, too negative focusing. We do need to, though, accept that students who cause a nuisance should be encouraged not to. I think the best people to do that is peer pressure from other students. But it's important to get those student views across, because I mentioned the kind of skewed opinion that you get. In Wavertree, for example, if you look at the police priorities, they say antisocial behaviour by students and parking are the key problems in Wavertree, and I just don't believe that. The key problems are burglary, vandalism, car crime, the minor assaults, and the drugs offences that affect people in all inner city areas. And I think if they actually talk to students about the difficulties they're having, they'll get better policing priorities that more reflect the problems that need attention. Two other things. One of those is my pledge to use the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner to utilise the expertise in our universities. Now, I mentioned when we were just talking that I know many of the lecturers at Liverpool John Moores University who lecture in law. I know people in criminal justice or in politics. They are internationally known experts in their field, as I am in mine. Likewise on psychology, on criminology, on prison policy, on business, in all kinds of areas that could help work with the police. We do not currently use the expertise that we have in the city enough to actually help solve policing problems. Youth work, an area where John Moores has expertise, where you could actually use that evidence to help the police do things better, because I've talked to John Moores experts who will confirm that the police are alienating young people by some of their stop and search practices. The final thing I would do is use the office not just to try and help opportunities for academics, but to help opportunities for students. I'm not going to have a load of money to be able to spread around, because I'm going to have to spend that on policing, youth services and victim support. But I would want to use the office to help students with internships, with placements, with work projects, which will also help the interaction between students and police and the community, not just in Liverpool, but across the whole of Merseyside, in Knowsley, St Helens, Wirral, Southport, areas where students, particularly from outside Liverpool, might not get to visit normally or be involved with the community. And I can use this office to help community links. So what I've said really is that the Police Commissioner job is not about doing the policing job, it's about helping put people together and supporting the best practice. But I'll be able to help kind of knock heads together and be a voice to say that everyone's got to be represented.
We'll be working in a difficult economic time. The government are cutting the budget to Merseyside Police, and by April of this year they will have lost £60 million from a budget of around about 320 million. By April as well, they will have lost 600 police officers. That doesn't include all of the civilian staff who support the police or the police community support officers, the PCSOs, that many of us will see on our streets, and they'll be the most usual face of the police that we see in our neighbourhoods. So we are losing a lot of personnel. And if I'm elected as the Police and Crime Commissioner, I'm going to have to be working within that environment. So the first thing I will want to do is to work hard to try and dissuade the government from making any further cuts, to make sure that we're getting the absolute best value for the money that we're spending at the moment. So I'll want to work with the Chief Constable on that. So I want to stand up for the communities of Merseyside against the cuts. The second thing is to make sure that even though these cuts are very deep, there's no need to privatise the services of Merseyside Police in order to save money. I don't believe it saves money, and so I will be making sure that PCSOs, for example, which some forces are considering putting out to privatisation, I will not support that. So defend communities against the cuts insofar as I'm able. Stop the further privatisation of neighbourhood services like police and community support officers. And then, even with all of that going on around us, one of my top priorities will be tackling gun and gang and violent crime. Because those crimes, where they are developing within Merseyside, absolutely destroy the safety of a community. And it's really important that we do the very best that we can to resist those crimes. And I know that Merseyside Police are really good at it, but I want to make sure that we keep on down that road and make sure that we fight those crimes. And I will also want to make sure that victims of crime get perhaps a better response than they've been used to. I think if you're a victim of antisocial behaviour, for example, you should get a response from the police within 24 hours. And that's a promise that I think we can make on Merseyside, even though we're reducing the number of police officers. So what I want to do is work cooperatively and in partnership with the police, but with the local councils as well, in fact with any agency at all that has any responsibility for driving down crime, fighting crime, and for delivering safer communities. Now for students are at very high risk of being a victim of crime, and we need to think of new and creative ways to work with students and the organisations that support students to help students. We've got a very big student population coming to Liverpool. It's great to have students. The city loves having them, and we want them to have a good experience here on Merseyside. Merseyside Police do their best, but they're not the only people who can deliver safer experience for students. So for example, we need the local authority to carry out its responsibility to make sure that students are living and working in a safe environment. We need the people who are responsible for delivering housing to students to make sure that they're delivering housing in a safe environment that is easy for students to come and go from. All of those sorts of things we can do by working cooperatively with other agencies. Now the final thing I'd really like to work on is look at the whole criminal justice system from start to finish. So if you're a victim of crime, I want your experience of the criminal justice system on Merseyside to be better than it is at the moment. If you're a victim of domestic violence on Merseyside, sadly it depends where you live and where your crime is reported, what kind of response you get from the state and from the police and from the courts. I don't think that's right. And I want victims of domestic violence to get the best possible response from the state, the best possible support from the police and from the agencies that work together to help protect victims of domestic violence. And I think at the moment, some areas get better support and a better response than others. And I think if I'm elected, I'll be able to talk to the people who run the courts, to the people who deliver the support services through the National Health Service or through liaison officers who work with the police. That's just one example of one crime where I think we can make improvements across the whole system. So although I might be elected as a Police and Crime Commissioner, and some people may think, well, the focus is just going to be on the police, it's going to be a really big and important part of the job, but I also want to see a much more wide-ranging role that I would seek to develop.